How about now? Oh, now I get the echo. Metro Transit funding or transit funding. We have a roadway assessments that we had applied to all roadways in Minneapolis. So all this funding came together. We used this umbrella to show the public where the public money was coming from and where the private money would be coming from. And it really helped to sell the project. That was a great graphic that Kimberly Horn put together. Really helped us communicate that budget message. Go next slide. Schedule. It looks great on paper. It looks easy on paper. This is where you all, I'm going to say poor Don, and you can go, oh, that's too bad. In February of 2018, the Super Bowl hit downtown Minneapolis. So you look at where Super Bowl would fall on that schedule. 2017 was my last year of construction in Nicollet Mall. So I'm up to here building Nicollet Mall, getting ready for a Super Bowl coming into town in like 4 months. Very stressful time. Meanwhile, on the other side of my office, I'm working on Hennepin Avenue to figure out how to deliver a Hennepin Avenue right in downtown with the very same stakeholders that just love me on Nicollet Mall. It's the same group. I said it was a fun project. It really is. So 2018, we get that layout done. 2019, we're working on design. 2019, Jonette went out to sell a streetscape. 4 million, all on the property owners. We wanted a streetscape with lights and all sorts of great things and great amenities. My job isn't just engineering, it's sales and marketing. And Jonette did a great job helping me get that through the businesses in downtown. At the same time, everyone was tired of construction. So it's a simple graph, but if you understand everything else that was going on at the same time, it gets pretty complex to deliver a project. We can go next slide. This is my favorite picture that Jonette came up with. It tells the story of Hennepin. There is so much going on. The more you look at the photo, the more you see on the the transit riders, over 8,000 a day. You have the moving traffic vehicles, 20,000 a day. 10,000 pedestrians walking on this corridor every day. Bicyclists, that's a big number. And then everything else that's going on. And keep in mind that all the cross streets are carrying 10 to 15,000 cars every day. 8th, 7th, 6th, not 5th, 4th, 3rd. So in a construction zone, you got to figure out this way, and then you got to figure out 15,000 cars every block going that way. Great. It just shows all the theaters, the lights, the distraction, everything that's going on for the driver that's out there. Very complicated. Next one. That's you, isn't it? Yeah. So, don't make sure the green light's on.
Yes. Okay. So this is a cross section of the existing street before the reconstruction. This is what we started with. And the guy there on the right is circled because some of you might remember circa 2009, Hennepin used to be a one-way with a bike in the middle and a contraflow transit lane. And then in around 2009, that changed to be a two-way street. That was a mayoral initiative to change Hennepin and First to be two-way streets. And so one of the things that was incorporated when that change was made was that the curbside lane was shared with buses and bikes and right turns. And so you can see kind of what that space looks like. And as the city, developed their bikeway master plan and really looked at what does downtown need to be, that is an uncomfortable place to be when you're at the curb and you have a bus passing you or a right turner. And so that was part of, in addition to the pavement and the sewers, which we'll talk about, but the street didn't meet what it needed to be anymore. And that was a classic example. This photo is of the bus stop at 5th and Hennepin. Again, this is a before photo. all the people you see on the sidewalk are waiting for their bus. This is a major transfer point between LRT and bus. And you can see it's hard to walk down the sidewalk because there's people everywhere. You can kind of see that little transit shelter in the background. There's more than 1,000 boardings a day here. So to have a little 6-foot by 2-foot shelter didn't really meet the needs of transit passengers. And it also was hard for other people that were trying to walk through this area because there are so many transit passengers. This photo goes to that previous cross section. I like this photo a lot because it has a person, if you can see, they're riding their bike in that curbside lane. They're being passed by a bus. They have a child seat on the back of their bike. So people would say, why do you need to put bike lanes on Hennepin? Nobody rides their bike. Well, people do, and that's how they get to their jobs. That's how they get to the Whole Foods. That's how they get to access to education, lots of things in people's daily lives. So it is important to provide those facilities so that they can do that safely. Don mentioned Hennepin Avenue is the part of the theater district. And so another part of the design that we needed to think about was, how does the street work for transportation? But then how do we also design it in a way that it works for activations and events? And some people, the only time they come downtown might be to see a Broadway show on Hennepin Avenue. And so how do we accommodate those types of crowds as well that are happening in the evening or other times? So it's not just a transportation corridor. It needed to feel like a special street. And that's part of where the streetscape came in. This is just another photo I like. This is a theater crowd in the evening. So this is what happens when the sidewalk gets too full. People are walking in the street. This is an example of activations. The Hennepin Theater Trust is located on the corridor. They do a number of small and large scale types of activations. So one of the things that was important to them was to continue to have space to do these types of activities on the street and really enhance that feeling of it being a special place. So this is a cross section of our proposed design. So one of the main things that we did was to move the curb lines in. So where you saw that image where the bike and the bus were sharing the same amount of space, the space actually did not change significantly, but what was significant was that the bike moved behind the curb, which is safer for the bicyclist. It's also much more comfortable for bus drivers. Bus drivers don't want to pass a bicyclist either, and so that was the key thing. And then continuing to have really wide sidewalks and space for furnishings and streetscapes was important. And then generally for travel lanes, which was something that we had to sell to the downtown community. They wanted to continue to see left turn lanes. In this case, largely the left turn lanes were not part of the section to fit all the other things that wanted to be on the street. So back in 2018, at that time, arterial BRT consisted of the A line, but this Hennepin was envisioned to be part of the E line, which is now in design, but at the time was not funded, had not gone through the corridor planning process. But this is a 30 to 50 year street reconstruction. So the design that we come up with needs to accommodate this BRT project that's going to be coming in a few years. And so we worked with Metro Transit and had quite a bit of back and forth about consolidating bus stops. We went from 13 bus stops in the project to 8. And then for the bus stops that were staying, to really enhance them and have facilities that were ready for BRT, and then also worked with the bikeway and the sidewalk design that we were working on. So you can see some of the features here. One of the things I'll point out, and you'll see it in some images later, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, how do transit passengers interact with people that are on the bikeway? How do we make sure that there's clear sight lines, that we make it clear where people should cross the bikeway into the transit station and how do we best manage those conflicts. So to get to our design, we looked at best practice in a number of locations around the country. So you can see some examples that are on the slide there. The one on the left is actually Washington Avenue, which was built a few years before Hennepin Avenue. So we looked at some things there, as well as Chicago and Portland. I don't think Casey Atkins is here. Casey actually made this. I don't know if you can tell what this is. It's basically a tactile exhibit. So we had a series of workshops with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Bicycle Advisory Committee, and the Minneapolis Advisory Committee for people with disabilities, and to help explain to people that had no or low vision, how do the transit stop, the bikeway, and the sidewalk relate to each other. Casey went to the craft store and made this little tactile exhibit so that we could explain, here's how the different elements relate to each other, and here's how you would cross from the sidewalk into the transit stop. One of the things that we ended up including in the design and was a first was the tactile guide strips. And these go, or these are located along the sidewalk near transit stations. So at the transit station, we have the platform, we have the bikeway right next to it, and then we have the sidewalk right next to that. So one of the concerns was that for people who have low or no vision, how do they know where they can cross into the transit station? And how do they know if they have, they're getting to the edge of the sidewalk and they're about to enter the bikeway? So this was a new treatment that had not been implemented in Minnesota. We did a bunch of research. We looked at best practices from other cities and other countries. And this is what we installed on Hennepin. These are some construction photos. SEH was the construction manager on this project. They did a really great job of taking the design, which was, we know we want to do these tactile strips. We know we want them to be this long. They haven't been done in Minnesota. The manufacturer only wanted to give us 6-foot wide strips. We wanted, or 6-inch wide strips. We wanted 12-inch strips. So they did a great job of taking that and actually building something that worked, that met the intent of the design, and without having really an example to point to say, this is how we should do it for this project. You know, we did it over here, do it again here. Safety was a big part of the project, pedestrian safety in particular. Hennepin Avenue, pedestrians and bikes, before the project, pedestrian bike crashes were 10% of the crashes and 90% of the severe and fatal crashes. And there were several fatal crashes on this corridor. And so protected intersection design, making those pedestrian crossings as short as possible, making those curb radii as tight as we could make them. In some cases 5 feet where we don't have any right turners because of the one-way street system in downtown. We use 5-foot curb radii, but really trying to tighten everything up. And in this particular design, because our bikeways are at sidewalk level, that means that there is a mixing zone at the intersections where bikes and pedestrians need to interact with each other. And we, had some debate about what is the right design here, but ultimately landed on, we needed to do what's safest for the pedestrians, which is to have that bike and pedestrian interaction behind the curb and really limit that interaction between vehicles and either pedestrians or bikes, make that as short as possible. And then the other thing you can see here too is that the bikeway pulls back away a little bit from the intersection so that there is a little bit of that buffer space for where we do have turning vehicles, for sight lines and for turning vehicles, to provide the safest design we can there as well. And that's a photo. So this is a photo of the linear guide strips after they were installed. So this is the transit stop at 4th and Hennepin. The other thing I'll point out in this photo, the kind of blue slanted thing you see in the background, because the transit shelters weren't going to be installed for some time, there are plywood protection over the foundations that were poured. And then the Hennepin Theater District actually used it as an opportunity for public art. So they had a Native American artist come and design a covering that could go over those. And those were out there for a couple of years. But it was just kind of a cool thing it was something they wanted to do. And I think it made the project look nicer for the 2 years where we had a transit shelter foundation and we didn't yet have a shelter. Don mentioned the streetscape. There was $4 million of assessments to property owners. And some of the big things that funded were larger trees. We wanted to have more of a green impact on day one. Hennepin Avenue does have a lot of events, but during the day or when there aren't events going on, we want the streetscape to look nice and not be all hardscape. And so having larger trees and planters was important. And then we also incorporated custom light poles. So we actually had a theater lighting subconsultant who worked with us to design these custom poles. They're inspired by theater rigging or theater mechanics. And the thing that was cool from the lighting perspective is you can see they actually have 3 different arms. So you can aim the roadway light, the pedestrian light, the bikeway light separately, and they look cool. They also have the ability to, one of the things that wasn't funded, but the theater district had interest in doing sound and music or doing like colored lights in the future. And so these have the ability to add those things on in the future with the conduits that are already installed in the inside each of the poles. Back to you, Don. Fun of construction.
You're too nice. You say, oh, we did some workshops. Over 250 meetings. 250 meetings, business by business. And yeah, we did have a lot of discussion on how to do the bend in and the bend out bike lanes. You're also too nice. Those were try to figure that out and make it work. So thanks for being nice. You did a great job.
You went to a lot of those meetings too.
I was there. Advanced utility work. So the sanitary sewer was originally built in 1882. I started in 1988. So just to keep those numbers straight. So about 100 years before I started on the job, that's when that pipe went in. It just changed shape. It's down over 20 feet deep. So that's like 2 stories down and it's way, way down at the bottom. You have to get through everything else to get at it. Full replacement. Easy, but it takes time. And so you have to have those trench shields going down 2 stories and then you can only move at 10 feet a day. That's about how we chunked along. It took a long time to do. Maybe that next slide is similar. Above all those sewer pipes, you have all the crossing lines. The beauty of wireless technology, there's a lot of wires under the street to make wireless happen, and they're everywhere. Let me talk about risks. Maybe this is a good slide to talk about risks. So the slide says 2019. Go back to that schedule. I started construction with the project in 2020. So when you talk about risk, I was ripping up Hennepin before I even had the plans done and before I was all done. That's risky for an organization to do. You're betting on everything working out and coming together because in order to keep a schedule, you got to start now. At least a full year of just utility work. That keeps you awake some nights and wakes you up other nights because you got to make sure it all happens. The other thing about replacing sewer lines, they're active. You can't shut them off. You can't go to city center and say, for the next week, could you just not flush? It doesn't work. So now you have extensive bypassing to make it all work. Sorry, I'm bringing that up during the lunch hour. Apologize. It's just a function you need to be aware of. That next one. Meanwhile, in other parts of the city, during this time, I was saying 4, 8, 10, Hen, because 4th was under construction at the same time, 8th at the same time. Hennepin was being ripped up, and I shut down the 10th Avenue Bridge for a major rehab. At the same time, the state said, we're going to shut down 3rd for a major rehab. So if you're trying to get into downtown, it was pretty tough. Very scary to try to figure out how to get all those vehicles moving around, keep people getting to work. That's prior to COVID. So very challenging, not just the digging the ground up, but trying to figure out how to get everybody to navigate around downtown. Another thing that might wake you up at night as you try to figure that out. Next one. Oh wait, I got COVID in there too. Yeah, so COVID hits in St. Patrick's Day 2020. That's when I sent my entire division home. Go home. I think we started construction maybe a week after that.
Yeah.
1 to 2 weeks after. The contractor shows up. There's nobody there, and I'm going, this is really odd. There's no one here. And so the construction crew said, let's go. And they went as fast as they could. The bad side was all the businesses said, well, now you can go faster because there's no traffic. But it didn't quite work that way. But that was a challenge to try to figure out. As you all know, we all went through it. The murder of George Floyd happened. We had civil unrest, and that was a real thing to deal with as well. As you all know, you're downtown Minneapolis trying to make this all work. We had to do some changes along the way. Have to be flexible and change your approach. Yeah, the street construction began in 2020. Maybe the biggest thing about this slide, when the public invests, the private sector will invest. So if I look at 4th, 8th, 10th, and Hennepin, that's over, I'm going to say $130 million worth of public investment went into those projects. The private sector invested too, whether it be new developments, remodels. All down Hennepin there is remodels. We saw that happen, and the return on investment is a very large number to revitalize downtown. This slide captures that. A lot of work going on the private side. Innovative solution. I don't think on a road project I've used concrete pumper trucks, but this one we did, because the staging to get, when you're building concrete, how you build half at a time, quarter at a time, figuring out how to get a truck in when you can. The contractor came up with this. Great idea. Quick operation, and you can get anywhere you need to in that area. So these are the type of creativity solutions a contractor came up with.
I also like this photo too, because the building on the right is a historic property. So this is a federally funded project. Historic properties were a big deal. And then on the left is what used to be Block E is now Mayo Square.
Mayo Square, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have a big concrete pumper truck in the middle trying to build the street in between those buildings. So just kind of a cool.
Yeah, fun, because I'm not allowed to close anything. I have to keep it open to pedestrians. I got to keep it open to transit. People still need to move around. We're getting better at it, but it's just another challenge to make things work out. Oh yeah, back to you.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about lessons learned, and this project was construction finished in the fall of 2022. And so we're still learning some lessons, but there are some things I think that, even looking back a few years, 3 or 4 years, we can say, yep, that was the right decision. Don mentioned we went through a lot of back and forth about the bend out bikeway design, and I think we came to the conclusion that was the right design. That's what the city has now in their street design guide. That's what's being implemented on a number of projects. And it really is for safety, for visibility of the cyclists, and it makes a better intersection design. The tactile guide strips I talked about, the city is doing an evaluation of those. I think we're still learning, different projects have implemented them in slightly different ways. So trying to learn how people use them. What is the best application? Do we use them everywhere? I think we're still learning from that, as well as maintenance, because that was a big question that came up too, is how do these hold up over multiple winters? So this is something the city is continuing to do when we have these types of situations, these types of design situations, and think it's a good solution. Still learning exactly how they will apply in the future. I also included this photo. You can see the pedestrian crossings from the sidewalk to the BRT station design. We have gotten good feedback about that type of design. And I'll flip to the not quite as pretty picture because there's snow. But you can see actually in this picture with the shelter and the railings installed, and have gotten good feedback actually from Metro Transit as well, that this does help tell people where they should be crossing, and it does help manage some of those conflicts and make the expectations clear about where people should be. So this is our wrap-up slide, so get ready, get your questions ready. I would say the other thing, Don, I was going to mention, it is much easier to build a driveway to a city parking ramp during COVID when there's no one parking there, and you can just shut the driveway for however many weeks that you want to shut it to build that driveway. It's not good for city revenue, but it does make it a lot easier to build. So as Don said, this was a project that replaced critical infrastructure. It was a project that was really needed for the sewer, for the underground infrastructure, and for the street itself and how people are using the street. The right-of-way, we didn't have any more right-of-way to give, but we took that right-of-way and reallocated it to make it work better for all the people that are on Hennepin in all different modes. And then as Don mentioned, the revitalized streetscape and really having public investment that also spurs private investment as well. That earlier photo, those are both 20 plus story skyscrapers that were under construction at the same time as the street. Those were both redevelopments of parcels that were either vacant or maybe underutilized, had some, 1970s type office buildings on them. And so that was a great revitalization for those blocks. So with that, can answer any questions. I don't know. Oh, Ruben?
A couple of maintenance questions. Some great photos of the kind of lower height planting along the corridor, and also snow clearance on the bikeway relative to the sidewalk. Shovel the sidewalk.
The question was, the maintenance of the landscaping that's out there, and then who shovels. So in downtown Minneapolis, we have the Downtown Improvement District. Oftentimes you hear it called the DID. There's it's a special service district that got set up, paid for by the downtown businesses, and they go out and do the maintenance of the plants, and much of that maintenance. They also do the snow removal, snow clearing and snow removal. So they'll do the plantings or any of if there's banners that go on the light poles, they'll do that. And then the businesses pay for that. One of the things on the maintenance side, the tactile strips that are in there, it took us a while to figure out how deep to put them in so they're effective, but not too deep. If they're too high, the plows shear them off. If you're plowing against it, they shear them off. If you're going along, it's fine. If you use a brush, they work fine. So these are the types of things we're looking at as we go along.
Joe?
The question was, is the development coming in more multimodal? In essence, what type of new development is coming in? I don't have any specific numbers. Obviously with COVID, that's really a game changer with what happens in downtown. But this is the theater corridor, and I'm seeing that is still vibrant, still going, and nothing helps business like a winning baseball team. And honestly, and so you see that on years the Twins are doing good, all those restaurants are full. And so I think there's many pieces that the downtown business group is looking at. The entertainment's part of it, but I think the office part, we're waiting to see what's going to happen with that next. Most of those buildings are housing. So you got the support downtown for housing. You got a Target downtown, you got a Whole Foods, you got a Lund's, you got restaurants. And so we're seeing a lot of condos being built downtown. So by default, that's going to be transit.
One of the statistics that we used to say, and I don't have the updated numbers, but the downtown population, this was a couple of years ago, was about 45,000, which is about the population of Lakeville. So there is a lot of housing being built downtown, which does speak more to those bicycle, walking, transit type trips because it is less commuter focused.
Question is, what about deliveries? There's no easy answer to that. As I look at, there's deliveries, but there's also Uber type things, Uber and Lyft for moving people, Uber Eats for getting something. That is a complex conundrum to deal with downtown. So there's different types of deliveries. If it's a beer truck, that's different than a UPS dropping off a package, which is different than, depends on the business and depends on how big the vehicle is. Our traffic operations folks are looking at that on what to do with curbside use. We're calling it curbside use. Do we make it loading zones, or do we make it, quick parking, or quick for like the delivery folks, Amazon, UPS. So I don't have a direct answer, but it comes into play on what you do with the curbside use, because if you don't have something, they'll block the moving lane, and then that can create problems. So one of the safety things that Jonette's team looked at was, we said we reduced the bus stop locations, but we also eliminated much of the turn lanes, and we kept turn lanes in at, I think, Washington and at 3rd. Using better signal timing and better operations and understanding where left turns and right turns could occur, that's what helped on the safety side of where you put those bus stops, because you don't want a bus stop where a car has to come up and turn right around the bus. It's bad for the bus, it's bad for the pedestrian. Left turns, kind of the same thing. So if you move the buses just a block away, you remove that conflict. That helps the overall traffic operations and traffic flow. It helps the buses move quicker and more efficient. It's great for the pedestrians and bikes because they know they get used to that corridor, and so do the drivers. The vehicles can then move forward, and I'm not going to say faster, I'm going to say more efficient, because they're moving at a more constant rate. They know where they're going, and that they know where they're going to be turning left. And so it's working better. It's hard to say because the traffic volumes are down, but from what I've seen, it works a lot better with the traffic we have.
I don't know if Mike Anderson might be online. Mike Anderson did a lot of traffic modeling. Yes, you were 100% right. We did do a lot of traffic modeling, and the business community was skeptical that we were going to narrow the road and that it was still going to work for their building, their tenants, those types of things. So we had a lot of conversations with all of those different property owners and the business association in downtown. And what we saw was that in the peak hour, and it was really the AM peak hour, the travel time would increase by 30 seconds. And so when we started talking about it like that, people, okay, I can understand what that means for my commute. We're not saying it's the same. We're not, we were less focused on level of service and to say, are we still moving people? And are the travel times reasonable and people can get to where they're going? Yes. So that was our goal.
Some of that's common sense. You as commuters, if you can rely on how long it takes to get from point A to point B, you're fine with it. You really are. It's the unexpected things that really aggravate people. The extra 10 minutes that you weren't expecting. But your commute, if it's constant, day in and day out, I think you're just fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any papers to publish to prove that. It's just basing it on my teenage kids when they get angry because something happened and it took them longer to get point A to point B.
There's a question online. Was there any discussion on putting in bus lanes on Hennepin early on?
I don't remember.
Yeah, if I remember, the cross section was approved by the state council in July of 2018. We finished final design in 2019. I believe the city's first transit lanes on Hennepin Avenue south of here went in as a pilot in 2019. So we did not talk about that a lot on this corridor. I know that is something that's sort of out there of whether they might be converted in the future, which it's a good question. Maybe not. But yeah, it was pre the pilot on happened before the pilot on Hennepin South.
All right, let's thank Jonette and Don for the presentation. We also have the award plaques here for you all. So, Horn. I also have Alliance. I was gonna set that one. Probably just take a picture in the back afterwards.
Okay.
Less crowded. All right.
Thank you.
That's all we got. So the next section meeting is February 24th at Jack's Cafe. I've had an invite from out here shortly. So thanks, everyone.